People dying in jail waiting for mental health help at a state hospital. Tonight, our ongoing investigation into this issue reveals a total number of deaths on this wait list and what one senator says Texas should do about it.
First tonight, though, those temperatures are dropping as an Arctic front moves through Central Texas, and with it, extreme cold warnings and cold weather advisories here in Central Texas. And there are also the risks of dangerous wind chills. You've probably heard the wind howling this evening.
And right now, the website for the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, the state's grid operator, shows there isn't enough power for the current demand. But ERCOT did issue a weather watch that goes into effect tomorrow through Friday. The concern is the extreme cold and the potential increase in energy demand and lower reserves. Chief Meteorologist Nick Bannon is here tracking all of those conditions for us.
Well, just within the last few minutes, the temperature in Austin just dropped below freezing, and we're going to see these numbers continuing to drop through the night. We're already way down in the low 20s in the hill country. 31 in Austin, 28 in Georgetown, 30 in Dripping Springs. Our eastern counties holding on to temperatures above freezing for now, but not for much longer. You can see these howling winds gusting on the order of magnitude of 20 to almost 40 miles per hour. That's that 37 mile per hour gust in San Marcos. So these winds are brutal, and it only brings down the wind chill, which is that feels like temperature on exposed skin. It feels like single digits in parts of the hill country right now. Feels like teens for most, 20 in Austin, and low 20s, the feels like temperature in our eastern counties. On top of that, there's a little bit of a concern for some icing. Even though our rain has moved on, there's been some lingering drizzle on top of the puddles that we have too. So the drizzle could freeze on contact with those elevated colder surfaces like fences, metal mailboxes, exterior items that are elevated off the ground. Not necessarily roads just yet, but we'll have to watch those roads. And also any puddles left over from the rain of the day, those could freeze up overnight too. So we'll call it icy spots overnight, and we do want you to be extra careful, especially over the next few hours before the wind dries us out. So we get down to 25 here tonight, windy and very cold, those icy patches, but continuing to dry the air out. Don't forget the people, pets, plants, and pipes before you go to bed. Coming up in First Warning Weather, we'll track 2 very cold days, more dangerous wind chills, and a big warm up by Sunday.
We talk about recognizing the umbles, right? So stumbling, fumbling, mumbling, and grumbling.
Well, tonight is a good time to remind you about the dangers of being out in weather like we're seeing right now. Austin Travis County EMS is asking if you don't need to go outside at this point, please just don't.
And if you absolutely have to be outside, here's what you should be looking out for in yourself and others. Signs of frostbite may include white or grayish yellow skin that feels unusually firm, waxy, or numb. And signs of hypothermia include confusion or memory loss, slurred speech, and drowsiness. And
that light rain earlier today, mixed with the wind and the Arctic front, is a bad mix for people who don't have the option of staying warm inside. KXAN's Grace Reeder explains how the city of Austin is working to save lives tonight.
A little rain, a lot of wind, and an Arctic front that's going to drop temperatures well below freezing. A bad mix for being outside.
Even if it was dry and cold, now it's going to be dry and windy and cold. And maybe it's going to be wet and cold. So every complicating factor you add just increases the risk for everybody being out and about, which is why we really encourage people to stay inside during this cold snap.
But some people don't have that option, which is why outreach groups,
they could be warm for tonight,
and the city of Austin have been out the last few days working to once again get people information about the city's overnight cold weather shelters.
If at the end of the day they absolutely refuse to go, we're going to prepare them as best we can. We're going to give them blankets, extra clothing, heat packs, things like that to help them brave the elements.
Meanwhile, Central Health, Travis County's healthcare district, says a new partnership they have with EMS is critical in times like these. The Bridge Clinic off I-35 is a place for people that may need specialized medical care.
And so it's really designed for people experiencing homelessness or who are otherwise vulnerable or marginalized that are disconnected from our care system, who we can rapidly engage in care.
The Bridge Clinic does not currently have extended hours during winter events like this one, but for people who may end up in the ER with hypothermia, frostbite, or even need an amputation, the Bridge Clinic is where folks may end up to get long-term treatment in the coming days.
We're always going to be there when they need us, but we want people to get ahead of it as opposed to reacting on the back end.
Grace Reader, KXAN News.
And the last major cold snap Austin experienced last month in January resulted in at least 12 cold exposure calls, including 2 fatal incidents, according to Austin Travis County EMS. Now, those incidents were all people outside who had apparent hypothermia.
Missed deadlines in court led to 2 different murder suspects recently getting released from jail. Prosecutors hope to reverse that move in at least one of those cases and will ask for a bond increase during a hearing tomorrow.
KXAN's Brianna Hollis joins us live from the courthouse now to explain how these deadlines work, Bree.
So these are bond-related documents for those 2 suspects, Stephen Morrison and Juan Ramirez. We walked through these with a legal expert who explained those releases happened because prosecutors missed a particular 90-day deadline. This is where police believe 19-year-old Stephen Morrison killed 20-year-old KXAN Cage in October. Police arrested Morrison about a week later. His initial bond, $800,000. It dropped to $100. There's a similar trajectory for Juan Ramirez. Police arrested him last year in a 2022 murder case. His initial bond, $1 million. It dropped to $1. So the only reason this case is in the position it is right now is because it wasn't indicted in time.
That's correct.
Defense attorney Ben Gergen walked us through this case as a third-party expert.
But usually you're not seeing murder bonds reduced to $100 unless A, there's a very good self-defense argument that, is visible in the evidence and the DA's office isn't that opposed, or you do have a missed indictment deadline.
That deadline is 90 days. In Morrison's case, records show the state secured an indictment on the 91st day. Because prosecutors missed that deadline, the judge has no choice but to reduce the bond to, quote, something the defendant can afford, according to the motion filed by Morrison's attorney.
Number one, it shocks the family.
Kathy Collins is a victim's advocate with the Christie Center, an organization that provides free grief support. She says even if this is how the system works, it creates more strife for the families involved.
It's a reflection of, I guess he didn't amount to anything if that bond was reduced. Why would you reduce the bond on this person?
Prosecutors plan to ask for a bond increase in Morrison's case tomorrow. We will be at that hearing and give you updates. We also asked if the state plans to do the same for Ramirez when he's due back in court next month. We're still waiting for a response on that. Jen, Daniel.
All right, Brianna Hollis, thank you so much. Tomorrow, the state Senate is expected to debate bail reform. Governor Greg Abbott declared it an emergency item this legislative session, so that allows lawmakers to prioritize it immediately. Some of the proposals could make it harder for people charged with felonies to bail out of jail. We do have a closer look at what bail reform could look like right now on KXAN.com.
Can you imagine waiting 200 days for necessary health care? This wait time is not only an injustice to the individual who has a serious psychiatric diagnosis and in need of medical care, but it's also a disservice in the criminal justice context.
At latest count, people were waiting in Texas jails an average 233 days for a maximum security state hospital bed to have their competency restored. By law, they must receive that critical mental health treatment before they can stand trial and actively participate in the court process. But 233 days is a dramatic drop from the record just a few years ago when people waited an average 827 days. The number of people on that list has dropped too, from a record more than 2,500 a few years ago to fewer than 1,800 today. In that time, we've continued asking the Texas Health and Human Services Commission, what about the people waiting so long they die before getting help? The agency wasn't tracking that statistic then, and it isn't now. But lawmakers last legislative session directed the state auditor to take a one-time look at that number, among others. And the pieced together snapshot showed at least 54 people have died on the wait list since 2018, most of those in jail, something their loved ones say should never have happened. What do you think when you hear that number?
Well, I mean, I think of my brother. First thing I do is I think about my brother. He's one of those statistics.
Walter Macias doesn't like to recount what his family faced in 2018, but he continues telling the story, hoping leaders will act after hearing about his brother, Fernando.
He was very intelligent. He did very well in school. He was, always studious, and just almost like one day when he was like 21 years old, I just got word that he had a mental breakdown. I didn't know that it was that severe, but ever since that time, he was pretty much a different person. It wasn't the same brother that I knew.
Fernando was diagnosed with manic depression, schizophrenia, and bipolar disorder. Eventually, he was living with their elderly mother, who had helped care for him as his health failed.
So all those years of medication took a toll on his body, and some of his kidneys were the thing that in the end that started, he started deteriorating the most from his kidneys, and he was having to go on dialysis.
Walter says at age 61, his brother had stopped taking his medication and began to lose his sense of reality. It led to a welfare check and police surrounding his Bexar County home.
My mother was in the house, and that she was in a wheelchair, 84 years old in a wheelchair.
Their mother was killed in the shootout. Fernando faced 3 counts of attempted capital murder of a police officer.
He went into the county jail, and they deemed him to be mentally incompetent to stand trial.
A state jail standards report detailed his repeated refusal of medical services, food, and dialysis, and his declining health related to kidney disease and diabetes.
He wound up dying at the county jail because he could not get the kind of help he needed to get him stable.
It's really tragic. The people are dying while waiting for care. We don't know the causal relationship between their death and their psychiatric circumstances because we're not studying it.
State Senator Sarah Eckhart filed a bill last legislative session to study the availability of state hospital beds and their projected need, an effort to gather data to better implement solutions, including the prevention of deaths on the wait list. It passed the Senate, but not the House.
We are relying on a patchwork of data, and therefore we are left blind as to what we're facing.
This session, she refiled the bill. Why do you think that the state still doesn't track deaths?
I think the state isn't tracking it because they're afraid to know. They're afraid to know.
So the study you're proposing maybe could be a good first step toward regular tracking.
I think regular tracking is absolutely essential, and if we want to wrap our arms around the escalating costs at the local level, if we're going to blame the locals for coming up with solutions that cost property tax dollars, maybe we should take a look at ourselves first to see what kind of investments we're making at the state level.
Since the beginning of last session, the number of usable state hospital beds has risen substantially, from around 1,500 to 2,000 total available today. That includes an increase from fewer than 200 to nearly 350 available maximum security beds today. The type Fernando was awaiting, just like hundreds of other people now, even with these improvements.
I think the state's going to have to step up and build more facilities and understand that the situation, it's a public safety issue. It's an issue that can happen to any family. We had a good, loving family, and this changed everything.
Health and Human Services says adding beds has definitely helped the wait list, crediting state leaders for investing in expanding, renovating, and building new hospital facilities across Texas in recent years. The state has also purchased private beds in the community to free up space at state hospitals for competency restoration cases. It's also created 15 outpatient restoration programs and contracted with 18 jail-based programs across Texas since last session, and added more than 1,600 staff positions to state hospitals since then. Still, as of last month's HHSC committee meeting monitoring the wait list, deaths were not part of its regular tracking and did not come up in the discussion, despite our repeated questions. We'll keep you updated on any moves that might change that in the future. Catch up on our complete coverage by clicking on the investigative tab on KXAN.com and scrolling to the mental competency consequences link. Josh Hinkle, KXAN Investigates.
We mentioned at the top of this newscast that some elevated surfaces may be a little icy. Well, that includes our Austonian weather camera, which has picked up on that light freezing drizzle that we've had for the last few hours or so, and it froze on contact to the camera lens there. Mostly it's an elevated surfaces issue, not even so much elevated bridges. We think most of those, although not necessarily all, will be fairly dry. The issue that's going to affect us all is the wind and the cold. This is our Covert Bee Cave Auto Mall camera there in Bee Cave, and you can see the winds still blowing very strong now, and they will through the night. We're now down to 30, so we've dropped another degree even since I last talked to you 15 minutes ago. So these numbers are tumbling here tonight, and the wind is not helping to blow in that colder air, gusting 20 to as much as 40 miles per hour tonight into tomorrow morning. Those wind gusts come down just slightly in the afternoon, gusting 20 to 30 at that point. Still breezy tomorrow night, wind a little lighter on Thursday, but still breezy, gusting 15 to 25 miles per hour. And then those wind gusts starting to come down even more as we get into Thursday night. Of course, the wind, the cold, you put them together, it gives you the wind chill. That's that interpreted temperature on exposed skin. That's because the wind is actually helping to pull away your body heat. So the wind plus the cold makes it feel colder than it is. It's going to feel like teens and single digits tomorrow morning. Some 0 feels like temperatures to begin your Wednesday. This is dangerous stuff if you're not dressed appropriately for it. You can see upper 20s to near 30 is how it will feel tomorrow afternoon. Bundle up the kids, bundle yourself up. And then we get into Thursday morning. Thursday morning is actually going to feel colder in the metro and our eastern counties, but perhaps not feeling quite as cold in the hill country compared to tonight. But still single digits and teens for wind chills, and then those numbers approach freezing during the afternoon. On top of that, we're seeing the rain pull away, but there's some drizzle underneath the radar beam that may lead to some very spotty concerns. The other thing we're going to watch out for is any puddles created by the rain during the day. Those may freeze over here tonight and lead to a few slick spots overnight into tomorrow morning. I think it's going to be a patchy concern, but one worth mentioning. We start with clouds tomorrow morning. Sun trying to break through by midday. I think we'll see more of it as we head into the afternoon tomorrow. So we're down to 25 tonight in Austin, but overnight air temperatures, not the wind chill, in the teens in the hill country, middle and upper 20s in our eastern counties. Our high gets up to 37 tomorrow with that increasing sun. Still windy all day long. And then Thursday morning is actually the coldest morning by air temperature standards, with 20s and teens air temperature wise to begin the day. Certainly want to remember the 4 Ps tonight and tomorrow night. We do have an extreme cold warning already for late tomorrow night into Thursday morning to account for those dangerous wind chills. Here's a look at our first warning weather 7-day forecast. At least we've got a lot of sun on Thursday. Friday, though, the clouds come back. Upper 30s for highs. Low chances for rain, but if the rain continues into the night as temperatures drop down into the low 30s, we could have some wintry mix concerns. Climbing to 45 Saturday, mid-60s Sunday, and near 80 by Tuesday.
This is KXAN Sports, brought to you by Thomas J. Henry.
Hi, good evening. That was at about 5:45. Longhorns will have to wait a few more days for that home opener. They did everything they could to try to get it in. They moved it back to 5:30 up to 6, but Max Ballou and the fellas will have to wait. Jim Schlossnagle will have to wait to make his Longhorn head coaching debut at home. Adrian Rodriguez, the outstanding freshman, had to be a little bit frustrated, but they will get back at it hopefully Friday. Longhorns set to take on Dartmouth in a weekend series beginning Friday evening at 6:30. Also, #1 Texas softball team's game against Akron tomorrow already postponed. All right, should be a special week at UT because, yeah, the legend is back. Kevin Durant at practice this morning. Durant and the Suns will be at Moody on Thursday night to take on the San Antonio Spurs. KD went over the 30,000 point mark, and he is the 8th player to do that. Of course, this guy is way beyond just a great when it comes to the University of Texas. He is pretty much a brand by himself, and he only played 1 year in 06 and 07, but still his presence and his greatness still felt today and beyond.
But to have an opportunity to come back where you play collegiately and play a professional game against one of the best organizations in all of professional sports in the Spurs, you can't ask for a better scenario. But to have him come back here and be here this week and be around our guys and see our guys I mean, you can't ask for anything better than that. A lot of our guys' favorite players, Kevin Durant, and why they chose to come to Texas was Kevin Durant, So he's had an incredible impact, not only on our basketball program, but also on our athletic program as a whole. He's an incredible ambassador for Texas athletics.
Madison Booker wears 35 because of KD. No midweek game for the Horns. Aggies tonight taking on Mississippi State in Starkville. Aggies trying to get to 10-3 in SEC play. Henry Coleman the bucket. They're up 1. Mississippi State comes back. Keyshawn Murphy knocks down the jumper. In fact, they go up 10. Aggies make another run. Solomon Washington in the corner. They get within 4, and then Mississippi State, kind of an under-the-radar team, Michael Nwoko with the bucket, and they win. Now, Tennessee and A&M will play on Saturday morning. Finally, SEC Swim Championships underway in Athens, Georgia, and the women's 200-yard medley relay, and the Texas Longhorns bring home a first place as they win it. Grace Cooper finishing up the freestyle leg. They are leading Florida 238-140, first and second heading into tomorrow. On the men's side, this is kind of bizarre. There you see Kobe Carroza finishing second in the 800 free relay, but Texas, a school record and American record, even though they finished second, they lead Georgia by 18 points. More events tomorrow. Don't forget to go to KXAN.com for more sports.